So we were just talking about the thesis of what we're working with, and I think that a thesis that we're going to work, or an ideology that we're going to work towards, is empowerment through getting back to the moment. And the major tool that we use for that is body consciousness. Would that be right?
Yeah, I would fully agree with that. The only word I would eschew is the ideology. I don't want to make it an ideology. I just want to do an existential, moment-to-moment, relational meditation. And basically, that's what this could be. Somebody who can relate, and it would be better if there were actual participants,
right,
who would engage in the dialogue.
Always better in person, no matter what practice I've ever been involved in.
Dialogue is just, it's people identify. You're so lucky if you have a person who understands that he or she should always go to the foundation and ask very simple questions. But people don't do that because, oh, that's too simple, oh, I look like a stupid fool, etc.
Right.
And they don't ask the question everybody else should hear.
So that segues into the subject of today, which is self-consciousness versus self-awareness.
Oh, okay.
So you had done a small blog post on your recorder about what is the difference between observing oneself and judging oneself.
Oh, there you go.
I suppose.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think you can begin it that way if you want. Let me take hold of it. When people think of self-consciousness, often they think of the inhibited wallflower. That's nice, but...
Wow.
The inhibited wallflower, as I said, but, you know, the inferiority-driven loner, the individual with all kinds of self-doubt, okay? That's what people picture. They assume that self-consciousness either means that or is going to lead to that. Because what happens is a lot of people, when they start to become self-conscious in a judgmental way, they're judging stuff that they recognize as either non-functional or in some way hurting them, causing more suffering. And they begin to doubt themselves. Some people will actually, and if they don't openly doubt themselves, they defend like hell, which means paranoia. And so you get the paranoid schizophrenic will actually turn himself into Jesus Christ. I saw one down at the beach one day. He believed he was Jesus Christ. He may have had a moment during his schizophrenia where the universe opened up and he got to see something. Dostoevsky used to have massive seizures, epileptic seizures, but every time he had one, he had a cosmic vision of the universe. He saw the whole thing, and then everything would go black. And
interesting.
Had massive seizures.
That's.
He was, as you know, he was the greatest, the most beautiful psychological novelist. When I say beautiful, I mean the art of the language and the explanations and the descriptions and the surprises, the existential surprises that he keeps in store for you. Wonderful stuff. And Dostoevsky was like a course in itself. I read 10 or 12 of his books. Some of these people have these wonderful dialogues with them, and they can actually help you in this thing about self-consciousness and self-awareness. At some point, if the individual is strenuously trying to improve himself, now I've got to meditate, I've got to become self-conscious, self-aware, as Krishnamurti admonishes, as Gurdjieff admonishes, as the Buddha admonished, as all the great high mystics acknowledge, it's always based on your consciousness. That's where it's going to happen. So you've got to somehow clean it out, purify it, the way Zen would say, you just become empty, or do something with it. But you've got to do something with it, so it becomes a very strenuous thing that people do. And they do it as a consequence of feeling fearful oh, I've got to improve myself. My life is miserable. I'm going to go to hell, or whatever they think. It's not right. It's just not right. I'm not comfortable. I'm not happy. Maybe I try meditation. I go do yoga. I do.
Always an ideological projection.
You can call it that. It is a kind of a projection. It's like there's an answer here, but I don't even. It's not necessary that people call it an ideology. It is probably embedded in the idea that there's some big answer out there in one of these practices, and maybe people are enlightened and free and beyond suffering. I want to go there. So they just go towards it, the way a baby would go towards something. And we want to pretend that we have free will. You have certain type of people will never go for meditation on the coast of California. And they would never go to Esalen and undergo all kinds of body consciousness therapies, therapeutics, yoga and Rolfing and all kinds of things to get you back in touch with the primal self. Wonderful stuff. Most people won't do that. It's expensive anyway, and it's out of reach. It's on the cliffs of California, Esalen. I've been there. For the hot baths. After 1 o'clock in the morning, they let you go into the hot baths. And so I stayed there all night once in the hot baths. They have all these hot springs, and they're embedded in pools made out of the rocks that have been chiseled all out, and you go hang out in there. Wonderful stuff. It dehydrated me, so the next day I passed out. Dehydrated me completely. I don't know. It was so much fun. It was so nice.
Right.
All naked people sitting around, men, women. They're totally in California.
Right.
It's another country. And so, again, I get off in a tangent, but self-awareness does not have to be painful. What happens is automatically at some point, through a grace or what, you stop trying, as the Zen would point out. You stop trying to make the ego overcome the problem of the ego. Because all you do is reinforce it every moment. And so you just, I can't, I give up. And you really give up. You don't just give up verbally. You just let go. I can't do this anymore. And then suddenly it's not a problem. You realize, of course you're self-conscious. Of course you're self-aware. You've always been self-aware. There's a pre-reflective consciousness going on. And all you have to do is focus on it. And that's where your free will is, whether to pay attention to the fact that you are awake at that moment or not to, or just get absorbed in the external. I could talk about this.
Pre-reflective consciousness.
Think of it as a basic physical consciousness, but you are aware of yourself as here, there, pardon me, as opposed to here, there, everywhere. You are the separate being. And you are aware of that, and you are aware of all the kinds of, the body, I maintain again and again, is not an object. It's an object for somebody else's eyes, or yourself looking in the devil's mirror, thinking that you are what you see, but you are a field of awareness based upon the whole matrix of subatomic energy. You're a fire.
So the body, which we define as the limitation of our fingertips and skin and everything, is the limited field of awareness. And that consciousness is perception from the center of that field of awareness.
Yeah, good to put it at the center. Greg Braden, the NASA scientist, psychologist, philosopher, scientist in various forms, researcher of ancient doctrines, he would say that the body goes well beyond your fingertips. And then, people have reported the same thing when they've even tripped on various psychedelic drugs.
Well, I mean, our bodies intake oxygen, so let's just deal with breathing first, because everyone can relate to that. Maybe not so much electromagnetic activity, but certainly breathing. So you intake oxygen. At what point is oxygen you and you are it? You cannot possibly exist in a vacuum. You literally cannot exist in a vacuum. And so it only stands to reason that we are all floating in this sea of existence on every level, that perceivable and non-perceivable. And one of those non-perceivable levels would be the influence that we get from everything around us, certainly, and how much we're getting swayed by things that we have no idea are happening, including other people influencing us over time. But the one thing that remains constant would be that consciousness at the center of
the witness,
our existence,
the eternal witness,
individual existences.
And the eternal witness, the Easterners like to say that's the Atman.
Mm.
That's the great I seeing you, and seeing through you, because that consciousness is not limited to our type of consciousness.
So it is limitless consciousness.
It's a limitless. It would be, if it were true, then I look at it this way: there's only one consciousness. Or what do you mean by that? There's only one space. But space has functions. It's a field. And the field has functions. It's called black holes, suns, earths, butterflies, everything. We are all just appearing in this space and then disappearing. And eventually we're told that this entire universe is going to disappear. Or maybe it just shifts into another membrane. There's that too. Maybe everything has a kind of eternity to it. But the only thing that can be eternal is the space.
Right.
That empty space in which everything arises.
Stuff.
That's the foundation of everything, and that's empty space is called the pure light of the void.
Right.
And it lies at the heart. I know I sound pontificating, but I'm sorry. It's unavoidable. The pure light of the void, if it exists, if there is a victory over ego, where ego just disappears, when one realizes that one is made out of what? You're just made out of a coalescence of energy.
So you're saying enlightenment. When you attain
enlightenment, you just disappear.
Or you pass into heaven, or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, some of them come back as bodhisattvas because they want to help everybody.
Mm-hmm.
But
it's like some consciousness gets through a little more of the needle hole and is able to express what reality truly is a little better, maybe through a few beings at a time.
Or maybe they stand at the eye of the needle and the needle speaks to them.
Mm. So we go off track a little bit, but basically you're defining space as
the one consciousness.
Yeah, as being aware.
I mean, look,
space is aware of itself, and we are that space that is aware of itself.
Yes, and I can go there through looking at the foundation of this physical life. We are made out of subatomic particles. Mm. Are we not? I mean, Carl Sagan used to love to say, "You're made out of star stuff." We're made out of the same stuff, only we're just not as hot as the sun.
Right. Well, again, I mean, just bringing up, we're made of the culmination of the vitamins, minerals, nutrients, and elements that compose us, right? We can't get away from that. What would you get away from?
We do grow out of the ground. I know that the theists want to say, "Oh no, God created a Shazam." God, you don't have to limit God's creation.
Right.
I mean, why do you do that? What's your daddy? Is he what, Superman? Don't do that.
So the stork came.
Yeah, I mean, just another stork story. No,
but you grow out of another
being.
What,
you think this is not miraculous? That you came to consciousness?
Right.
You got to find it your little childish way?
Right.
I mean, the whole thing is poetry. I'm sorry. I'm just...
No, right. I mean, but totally, we grow from the earth itself and from each other, right?
Right.
So,
you ever go
in
look?
So many ways.
Look, in the back of my part of my yard, right, my back property, we've got a greenhouse, which is too hot to function. But behind that, there is some moss. You ever look at moss?
Yeah.
What's it made of? How many thousands of stamen?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
They're thousands and thousands of them hanging out. Imagine if they were at war with each other like humans.
Right. Well, yeah, I thought about the same thing with bacteria, gut bacteria.
Yeah.
Millions, billions of gut biome just like having an entire life, and we have no idea what's going on. Because it's supposed to be that stuff's aware. Like it's some
prototype.
It's supposed to be. It's almost.
Well, they show response.
I don't know if it is or not, and somebody, if I'm totally wrong about this, bring it up. But it's somewhat parasitic, or symbiotic, I suppose.
At best.
with us, and it keeps us alive as much as we keep it alive. We create an environment for it to live, and it makes sure that we stay healthy enough to stay alive.
Mhm.
So let me get to a question that I think some people get hung up on, and one that certainly inflames you.
Oh, thank you.
How do I know that I'm conscious?
And
How does one
my
get to
question
the
is,
point?
how do you not know?
Well, maybe someone is confused as to the definition of conscious, because some people think it's conscience, not
That's-
conscious,
that's true.
and also
Oh my God.
some people confuse consciousness with awareness.
I must be like this when I try to use the computer and people look at
Exactly.
me like I'm a
So
monkey.
different people are coming from it at different angles and have language barriers. Even those that have grown up with
What do
the
you mean?
English language
What do you mean delete?
right, have language barriers. You're learning. I mean, the thing that we're good at, right? Our brains, at least, are good at. We can't even claim that we're good at it, but our brains are great at processing information, both creating problems and solutions for things, all constantly, right? And it's something that we experience. But some people do not know what consciousness means.
Okay, you will tell them.
Well,
tell them.
so your work in school, what you finished your schoolwork was body consciousness.
Well, basically, my critique of Sartre's version of mind eventuated in my finding a flaw in the relationship between his version of a pre-reflective consciousness and the body. He still put something in between that was not valid, and that's what I showed it to be. And through that little crack in his relationship to the external world, because basically that's what body consciousness is. It's sensory, true?
Mm-hmm.
Okay? So it's outward bound, but he had done something, and I don't need to go into that. I would have to read from my dissertation to make it. It was some time, and I know it was valid because it was accepted by people who saw it, and then I find the same conclusion that I came to in Ken Wilber's Spectrum of Consciousness some, 20 years later when I first read Ken Wilber. I had not read Ken Wilber until maybe 1999 or something like that. And then I read where he said, unblocked organismic consciousness, meaning the body, unblocked, meaning no trauma, no all kinds of negative programming, none of that, all gone. Everything is gone. Now you're basically at the condition of the infant. And basically, he said unblocked human organismic consciousness is cosmic consciousness, which is pretty much what I said, except I never called it cosmic consciousness.
So
I just said that you'd be connected to the whole universe.
May I footnote that quickly?
Yeah, sure.
So you're saying that when an infant is born, they are completely in alignment with reality.
Many of them.
Until they become divided with cause and effect and influences.
You want to go into the division? I mean that's a volume in itself.
Sure, but basically what we're trying to do with being in the very moment through body consciousness, through senses, is to come back into alignment.
That's very good. I was going to use a more poetic expression to find a kind of a greater freedom in being alive. You know?
Yeah.
But yours is more, I think, specific to what can be done, because you're going to be actually teaching these people how to do things correctly and becoming strong and proficient and even basically good in self-defense and things like that.
Well, my work is also in body consciousness, it's both accepted. It's accepted from a lot of PTs and completely disregarded from a lot of athletes.
Oh yeah.
Because in my one criticism of athletes is, in order to be a highly competitive, highly functioning athlete, you are a divided being.
Yeah.
Because if you were a completely undivided being, you would realize the damage that you're causing your body in the moment at which you are doing it and decide not to do it.
Yeah, unless you're somebody like Cal Ripken, who played about 9,000 years and and had a record.
Different level of athleticism.
Yeah, right.
Skill-based athleticism.
But I heard that he is the most competitive person you could imagine. You can see it too when he would speak. He's like he's calculated in his own way. He's very smart, and he wants to win. He wants to be significant. He is. He just lives his life like that. But you can't play ping pong with him because it cuts your heart out to beat you. You know, that's what I heard.
Right.
And so I don't consider it really healthy, although it made him millions and millions of dollars.
So, I mean, healthy, that's a subject. We could debate that for God knows how long. But going back to body consciousness, getting into the moment, sitting on a seat, the feeling of one's ass on the seat itself, feeling gravity, how it's pulling on you, feeling your breath at the center of your existence, seeing things clearly with focus, hearing sound, smelling, tasting, feeling. That's the start. And thought of, I know I keep using the word today, idealizing what reality should be takes you out of sensing reality.
Right.
And so
the sensation is judged as suffering because it's not what you want. Oh, I could use all kinds of outrageous examples.
It could be more pleasant, basically, is what you are subconsciously
telling yourself. You want it to be
yourself.
more pleasant, just not enough.
Yeah.
And you know, the way things happen between people who are hot in love with each other.
Yeah.
And then after a couple of months, you know, like the song says, it's too hot not to cool down. So when it starts to cool down, oh my God, it died. Last night it died. You wake up and what you're doing is living in a Charlie Sheen, my favorite fun, crazy people. Everybody genius, all medical people producing laughter and good health.
So, if one first off wanted to make sure that they're being fully in the moment, what would be a few ways that they could start doing that, approaching, and what would be the result of doing that?
Okay, good question. Excellent question. Always towards the beginning. I like that. And a way that just comes to me, try to observe your posture and primarily watch your breathing. See what happens there. When people start watching their breathing, they start breathing, they interfere with it. You can't help but consciousness will interfere with its object. That happens at the subatomic level. That happens with electrons. So it's going to happen here too. So you watch something and it changes it. You don't have to do anything. If you're like in the Lamb and the Tigers, if you're full of fear and anger and you're a bully and you're afraid and all this and this and that, see it. Don't try to fix it. You don't know how to fix it. You either drop to your knees and become submissive, or you stand above and try to. You're a perfect authoritarian bully. You're Martin Bormann. He used to kiss Hitler's anal cavity and then kick everybody else below him. That's an authoritarian personality. Perfect example. They feel superior to you. They're very nasty. You don't exist as anything that's significant to you. That's how they feel about themselves, and they do it. They have to have an authority. Every authoritarian personality has to have an authority. Hitler had his texts about the ancient Teutonic Knights and people like that. He thought he was, he thought he was a reincarnation of one of the knights. He was a great king. So they all have to have their something that they believe in. They can't go adrift. They got to throw anchor all the time. Even if it gets wallowed in pure bullshit, it's okay. It's better than not believing something. Because if they don't believe something, then they wind up with a lot of the younger kids in Berlin. I bet there are a lot of suicides among young people, especially when the wall was up. All kinds of reasons, but the kids on the other side were just they must have been ready to explode. I go back to what you were talking about in very basic terms. You feel whatever it is there is to feel. You breathe and you feel. You pay attention to your posture, pay attention to your neck, to your spine. Pay attention to the thoughts that come out of your brain, and don't kick yourself because you can't stop the negative thoughts. Don't beat yourself up anymore. They come and they come and they come. Let them come. There's a picture of St. Anthony. I saw this years ago in an Alan Watts book, and then later somewhere. He's walking with the the cane and the stick, and he's got all kinds of demons, little demons from hell hanging on him, on his ears and his nose, cloak and the back. He's got like a dozen demons, and they're all flying around him, harassing him, and he's walking with them. He's got a little smile on his face. He knows who they are. He knows where they come from. And they're his pets.
Right.